most of them would die because they couldn't live because it's a special condition. And what we're looking at is what? Intelligent design. This is affected by intelligent design because there's an intelligence called Richard Lenski who's orchestrating all of this. Antibiotic resistance proves evolution. Now, we've heard this all true, right? Our germs have evolved. Well, they have evolved, and if you say evolution means variation, I agree. They've evolved. But if you say evolution means descent with modifications from a primitive kind, from a primitive single-celled organization, I disagree. The definition is key. That's the bait and switch thing. Many bacteria evolved resistance to antibiotics in spectacularly short time, right? Well, that's true. Well, we haven't used a lot of antibiotics until recently. Of course, we used to use them a lot in the ancient world. Tetracycline was well known to the Egyptians because in every Egyptian house there was a pot hanging in the kitchen, which was kept moist because it was a clay pot, and they put bread in there, and they used to eat the mold from the bread, the moldy bread, every day. And what's moldy bread? Well, in this case it was tetracycline. So they would eat tetracycline as part of their diet. So antibiotics have been around for a long time. Okay. And they can routinely gain resistance by exchanging DNA loops among bacteria called plasmids. Bacteria are different than humans. They don't get married, they don't have babies. Okay, they're very simple. But one of the things that bacteria can do is they can exchange bits of DNA between themselves. They hook up to each other and a string of fulfillment goes between the two, and they can exchange a couple of pieces of plasmids. These are little teeny chunks of DNA, and that's how bacteria can gain resistance or characteristics. They still remain the bacteria because they're constantly shuffling. That's why they're bacterial strains. Information loss and mutations, we just saw information loss, right? Loss of the flagella and the loss of the ability to not select against citrate. Information loss such as damaged pump. If you look at a bacteria, if you look at the surface of a cell, you'll see these structures that are basically pump filters, and the pump filter pulls in they're designed to pull in certain chemicals or push out certain chemicals. That's just normal. You've got gazillions of them in your finger. So if you damage, but they're all filtered. They all have a filter. So if you damage it, and it normally is the one that takes in the antibiotic because the scientists figured out that, oh, this bacteria is so stupid that if we put this chemical in it, it'll try to pull it in. Well, they break the pump. The pump gets broken and it won't pull in the bacteria, won't pull in that antibiotic, so they aren't affected by it much. Or a disabled control gene. Now, control genes are we have genes that make proteins, and we have other genes that control genes and control other processes. And so one of the things is that there's only so much energy inside of bacterium, so if you damage one of the things that's controlling an enzyme, so this enzyme is splattering out like crazy, and this enzyme just happens to be the one that destroys the antibiotic that's pulled into the bacteria, well, then that bacteria will survive, but it's spending so much time creating that enzyme, it's a weak bacteria. And the other one is reduced specificity of an enzyme. Enzymes do something. So if one of the enzymes is supposed to affect, say for instance, to break apart a molecule, and they do that a lot, or put together a molecule, and this antibiotic looks kind of like the molecule in that enzyme, and when it was produced by a damaged DNA information, it can't tell the difference between the antibiotic and the enzyme is supposed to work on, and it works on the antibiotic and just pulls it apart, well then you don't have any antibiotic even though the pump pulled it in. Okay? So you see this all the time in bacteria. And so these variations actually are already in the genome of the bacteria, or maybe an outside bacteria. Remember how they exchange plasmids, or mutational damage. And the change conditions allow expression. That makes sense, doesn't it? Oops. Okay, so still the same bacteria, no goo to you. More evidence of evolution. Darwin said the reason peahens select their peacocks is because of their tail. And that's why the tail's so pretty. Peahens don't care about tails. They like the sound. If the peacock has the right sound, that's great. And then there's a bunch of guppies. Who's raised guppies? I've raised guppies. You know, they get to be really pretty, right? The males can get to be really pretty. And so if what they say is that, and this is Dawkins is saying these are evidences of evolution, is that gaudy patterns proliferate because females select for gaudy markings. Well, that's true in experiments, but predators also select by the same criterion, and since predators usually win, most guppies in the wild are what? They're dull, okay?
So they can be camouflaged in their
Yeah, I mean, that's another example of intelligent design, because you're designing an experiment. Darwin predicted the existence of a moth. He never found it. With a very long, 9-inch long proboscis that could reach inside a very long stem of an orchid flower. And he said there has to be one because the orchid evolved, therefore a moth had to evolve. They found it. Yay, they found it. All right, it was just last year. They found it. It proves evolution. Whoa, wait a minute. That's a logical fallacy affirming the consequent, which is when I mow the lawn, I feel tired. Therefore I must have mowed the lawn. That means there are different ways that I could have felt tired, and there are different explanations for that, which is the creation. And so that's not slime to scientist evolution. Bad example. Here's the really good one. Embryology and self-assembly. Haldane, remember the bad guy Haldane, who's really a cad and a scoundrel. But anyway, he was lecturing on evolution, and someone said, "Hey, wait a minute, I don't buy all that stuff. How could a cell turn over eons into all this just incredible flora and fauna?" And Haldane said, "Well, you did it yourself, and it only took 9 months." Now, that's a false statement because the single cell doesn't have the genetic information to turn into a human. But a zygote does. In fact, the zygote is a human in miniature. And Dawkins said, anyway, if there were a God, that God would never create anything. Remember, special creation, right? That's the big problem. Never create anything. At the most, it might have this God might have shuffled some DNA. And to him, God could also be aliens from outer space. Okay? Visited here and shuffled some DNA. He actually has said that. So Dawkins rejects any God, except if they happen to be aliens from outer space, and says believers, that would include everybody in this room, are barking mad, or barking crazy, or idiots. Okay. So, I'm an idiot and I'm barking mad. Well, his proposition is an either-or fallacy, which means I have an argument and I say there's only 2 solutions to the argument, so which one do you want? Right? That's like the question, when did you stop beating your spouse? It's the same argument. Well, there's another one. I don't beat my spouse. God both created the world with kinds, with reproductive ability, and now sustains the ongoing orderly operation of the universe, which we call natural laws. We're discovering how God sustains. Darwin said if you study embryology, it's really just about this little cell acting on a couple of very simple rules interacting with its neighbor. That's all it is. And he uses a bird flock analogy. That is, if you ever look at a bird flock, you see all these birds and they kind of fly together, and what it turns out is each bird is kind of like is is keeping an eye on the bird next to it, and therefore the whole thing looks like it's moving in unison. And you can actually simulate that in a computer. But Dawkins asserts this is a valid analogy for embryonic development, and that the cells actually just follow little simple rules individually, and they unfold into a complex adult organism.
One of the things that book, The Live Evolution, brought out that is tied into this is that the pro-abortion spun out of evolution. Because
Yes.
if you can start off and say that little bitty cell isn't a human yet,
Yes.
then it doesn't matter if you destroy it or not.
Or if the cell is old in the bed and in the hospital bed, and you're tired of
Right.
dealing with it, you tell the doctor to inject it with poison,
Mhm.
and that's called euthanasia. Both
Mhm.
ends of the same spectrum,
Mhm.
the same one.
Yeah.
And the argument is it can't exist on its own. Okay, well, this is true. Well, actually, you can't exist on your own either. But it's true.
I know it's true, it's true.
And the person in the hospital bed who's got the ventilator and all this stuff, they can't exist on their own, so we might as well kill them too. That's the next thing that's going to happen in this country is euthanasia. It's happened already in Europe and in China, good places.
It's happening here,
Okay.
this plan.
And so Dawkins asserts there's no plan, no design, no designer needed, it's just an accident. Are you kidding me? The logical fallacy of composition. This is a PhD with faulty reasoning. And the one is, if atoms are microscopic and whales are made out of atoms, well then whales must be microscopic too. Chickenosaurus. This is a real program where we're going to build a Chickenosaurus. Since birds evolved from reptiles, we should be able to reverse the process and take a bird and turn it into a reptile. And so when it hatches, it turns into a reptile. And these are two of the leading lights in the world who are working on this program. Okay, one of them is head of macroevolution at McGill University in Canada, and the other one is the one who advised all the Jurassic Park movies. Okay, and genetically modified chicken zygote. You know what that is? That's the little fertilized cell to develop embryonic pathways to hatch a dinosaur. Just local rules, right? Behold, Chickenosaurus. Okay, so what we're talking about is we're going to turn that chicken into a dinosaur. And besides, evolutionists believe chickens are feathered dinosaurs anyway. Okay, these are the related doctrines of Genesis 1 through 11. The instant creation of the adults, fully mature, chicken created before the egg. God created each living creature according to its kind with the ability to adapt and to reproduce. And God created the world in 6 natural days. He created the world several thousand years ago. And there was rapid speciation due to the inherently rich genome information.